The cold, heavy evening of December 1972 saw a deathly silence over the coasts of North Vietnam, but in the deep waters of the South China Sea, the fury of the U.S. Navy was reaching a boiling point. This marked the beginning of a terrifying chapter in history known as Operation Linebacker II. But before the massive bombardment began, the U.S. Navy delivered a silent yet lethal blow that cut the enemy's jugular vein. This covert mission was codenamed Operation Pocket Money. Under the cover of pitch-black darkness, U.S. Navy destroyers laid thousands of sophisticated magnetic sea mines at the entrance to Haiphong Harbor. These were not just metallic spheres. They were hungry predators sitting on the seabed, detonating the moment they sensed the iron hull of any ship. The objective was crystal clear: isolate North Vietnam from the rest of the world. Massive cargo ships from the Soviet Union and China, carrying vital fuel and lethal weaponry, were forced to halt outside the harbor. Any ship that dared to move forward was consumed by the sea in a thunderous explosion. This blockade turned Vietnam's ports into a dead end where neither food nor war supplies could reach. It was the strategic might of the U.S. Navy, suffocating the enemy's economy without firing a single bullet. The ocean ways were no longer a path for Vietnam. They had become an impassable wall of steel. After isolating the enemy through the blockade, it was time for a display of the raw, ironclad power that is the hallmark of the U.S. Navy. Cutting through the waves of the Gulf of Tonkin, the U.S. Navy's largest and most powerful heavy cruiser, USS Newport News, CA-148, emerged in all its terrifying majesty. This ship was not merely a vessel. It was a floating volcano on the sea. Mounted upon it were the 8-inch, 55-caliber giant guns, at that time, the most destructive naval weapon in the world. When the guns of the Newport News fired in unison, the earth shook for miles, and the sea water erupted into chaotic surges. The shells, weighing hundreds of kilograms, flew faster than the speed of sound. When they slammed into the coast, the strongest concrete fortresses and bunkers disintegrated like houses of sand. This was no ordinary bombardment. It was the pure wrath of heavy naval artillery shredding the enemy's defensive infrastructure. The skill of the American gunners was such that they could accurately hit a tiny bunker miles away from a ship tossing in the sea. When the enemy's fuel depots were hit by these shells, fireballs rising to the sky turned night into day. The U.S. Navy demonstrated that when their guns speak, the enemy has no choice but to remain silent and wait for death. The war had now entered the hours of darkness where the human eye was blind, but nothing remained hidden from the U.S. Navy's radars. This armed fleet of destroyers and cruisers was now so close to the coast that enemy coastal battery shells were falling around them. Yet the American ships held their ground. Using advanced radar-guided guns, these ships began targeting the very veins that kept the Vietnamese army alive, their supply lines. The railway lines and roads running along the coast were now the primary targets. Truck convoys and ammunition-laden trains moving under the cover of night thought they were safe. But the moment they entered radar range, the steel coming from the sea finished them. When an 8-inch shell hit a train engine, it became a twisted wreck of iron, derailing and spreading fire for miles. Bridges were taken down one by one to ensure the enemy's movement was completely paralyzed. These night raids shattered the nerves of the Vietnamese forces. Soldiers huddled inside bunkers lived in terror that a heavy shell would tear through their roof at any second. These U.S. Navy ships maintained a continuous barrage throughout the night, not giving the enemy a single second to recover. It was a brutal display of power, proving that the U.S. Navy could sit at sea and paralyze the life of an entire nation. By the final days of Operation Linebacker II, the entire coastal map of North Vietnam had changed. Where there was once greenery and military installations, only deep craters and charred debris remained. The port of Haiphong was still sealed. Their supply trains had turned to coal on the tracks, and their largest coastal defense forts had been silenced. The U.S. Navy proved throughout this operation that they could bring a disciplined army to its knees using only their naval might, without any external assistance. When the time came to wave the white flag and the path to negotiations opened on December 29th, the biggest factor was those naval ships that had turned the sea into a river of fire. USS Newport News and its companion destroyers returned triumphantly, the American flag flying from their masts bearing witness to this great victory. Behind them lay only the smoke of destruction and a defeated enemy whose backbone had been broken by American guns. This operation was recorded in the pages of history as a symbol of the U.S. Navy's immense and ruthless power, which no ordinary army could hope to withstand. Even today, the echoes of those guns can be heard in the waves of the Gulf of Tonkin, reminding future generations that when this giant of the sea awakens, no bunker in the world can provide shelter. This victory was not just the win of a war, but a declaration of absolute naval supremacy.